Hey, what's up? In today's video, I'd like to get inside of the head of a chess grandmaster and show you how do I think while playing chess as well as the other grandmasters so that you can model that and also become a strong player. Today is a little special video. I'm turning 33 and I wanted to kind of summarize, my entire chess experience and give you some general blueprint that you can follow easily. And by the way, also thank you for all the birthday greetings that you sent me. I appreciate that a lot. Of course, thank you very much. Also, as always, when it's my birthday, we're making massive discounts for our premium courses that can help you achieve all of your chess goals. So if you're interested, do check this out. And without further ado, let's get to the actual things that I wanted to share with you. Here's the first example, played by not very famous players, Barua versus Tecker. It is black to play. What do you think about this? How would you play here as black? Once again, let me give you the general blueprint that you can follow, not just in this particular position, but in any games that you play, because the process of thinking is always the same. Alright, so first of all, generally speaking, they say that there are two types of positions, more tactical positions and more strategic positions. And in a more tactical positions, you rely more on calculating variations. How do you know what type of position you're facing, whether it's tactical or not? Usually you can notice that based on the contact of pieces, as I call this, meaning that the pieces are attacking each other. Also, if there are some weaknesses in the position, especially if the opponent's king is weak. These are the signals, that pieces are attacking each other, the king is weak. These are the signals that tell you that this is a tactical position and you need to calculate variations. Such as in this position, we see that, here we've got some tension, the knight is possibly can capture the pawn in one line. The queen is looking at the e1 rook, this rook is putting some pressure here, and obviously there are some variations that black can calculate. Also, we can see that the white's king is weak here on f1, it's not castled, and therefore black can try to take advantage of that. Now, what are the moves that black need to consider here? The simple rule says forcing moves, meaning checks, captures, and attacking moves, in the order that I just named them. And therefore, you gotta quickly check those moves. And actually, the lines which I already drawn here on the screen are pretty much showing you what kind of moves do you need to consider. It doesn't mean that it should take too long, because, for example, queen takes e1, you can very quickly see that white just recaptures and nothing really changes, apart from white winning material, so it doesn't really make sense. Taking the knight on f3 makes sense. Knight c5 right now doesn't work. White recaptures with the bishop, checking the black's king, so this knight we can also take away, this move we can take away. There is also maybe bishop to f5, another attacking move which would attack the white's queen. So that's how pretty quickly we can narrow down the list of moves that you need to consider to just a few. So you check if taking on f3 is beneficial for you. If not, you'll play bishop f5. And because I explained everything, it took some time, but in your head you can go through the same process just within seconds, especially after you train it just a little bit. So you see it's a tactical position, you look for checks, captures, attacking moves. Boom, you're done. In this case, black used this method to find that there is a winning shot, rook takes f3. And now after white recaptures, once again you look for checks, captures, attacking moves, and here it comes check. The purpose of checking the forcing moves first and foremost, it is because it is simple. When it's a forcing move, it forces a certain particular reply, and therefore you don't have to consider a lot of different moves of your opponent. You know that there's only one thing that they can do, such as in this case king to g1. So it simplifies your calculation. And once again you ask yourself, what are the checks, captures I can play? Usually these are moves forward, so your piece needs to move forward and either check or grab something. In this case it's queen to e1, checkmate. That's a classical example of how you think in tactical positions. Let's take a look at another position, but in fact it is a very similar thing, because again the process of thinking is still the same. This is kind of position that you often see while solving some tactical drills, but the problem with tactical drills is there's a combination there. In a real game you don't. But we know the difference between a tactical and a strategic position, right? So when you see that a position is tactical, it gives you the sign that you may still look for some sort of combination in your practical game. Because a lot of people struggle. They can find combinations easily while solving tactical puzzles, but they can never find them in their actual games. But that's how you know that you should look for a combination. In this case, we clearly can see some contact of pieces, I call this. There's a lot of like white is putting strong pressure on the black's king, the knight is hanging, the bishop is potentially under some threat. White's knight can jump all around and calls, create a lot of threats. So you can clearly see that it's a tactical position. And now you start looking for, let me ask you, what's the move that you should think about first? It's a check move, queen takes g6. It forces the only reply h takes, then rook takes h8, sorry, not takes, just rook h8, another check, king goes to f7, knight g5, checkmate. If you have the right system of thinking, you can find this combination within 2 seconds, really, and that is how Grandmasters think. A lot of people have the false belief that Grandmasters can calculate every move for like many moves ahead, which is not true. They know when to calculate and what moves to calculate, which simplifies matters for them. They cannot and they should not calculate everything like a computer. They know that if it's a tactical position, then they only need to employ calculation. And mostly they only need to consider checks, captures, attack, and moves, which narrows down the list of things that you need to consider to very few. So Grandmasters are not some supercomputers, they just know how to apply the right system of thinking. And also finally, let's take a look at this example, very good one, the one which I like a lot. In this position it was black to play, he played bishop to c5, attacking the pawn on b2. And if I ask people how would they play here as white, usually they say pawn to b3, because obviously the pawn is under the attack, so white thinks, alright, I need to move the pawn to b3, which is actually a mistake. We'll see why in a moment. Now let's also think for black, how should black play here? And again, if I ask people how would they play here, they usually suggest something like rook to e8 or other moves that would improve their position a little bit, which does make some sense, but the thing is, in this position, there is still a tactical element that people overlook. First of all, we say that a position is tactical usually when you see that pieces are attacking each other. Your pieces and opponent's pieces are attacking, there is some tension. But there is also the second factor that people often forget, which is a weakness of the king. If the king is exposed or if its mobility is limited, we call it a weakness. It creates some tactical motifs and you can possibly think of how to take advantage of that. And when a position is tactical, once again you consider checks, captures, and attacking moves, right? So if you implement that way of thinking, you see there are no checks, and like as for the captures, there are also not many really. And there is a move queen takes g3, which at first looks like a shocker, but does make sense because after that, white goes king g7, and all of a sudden, even though white has an extra queen and it is his turn, he cannot stop the very straightforward threat of rook to h8. Checkmate. You just can see how important it is to notice the difference, like when the position is tactical and when it's time for you to shift your thinking from just improving your position to considering checks, captures, attack, and moves. And this time we can see a more strategic position because there are like no threats to either of the kings, and nobody's attacking anything, and therefore you can see that it's a more strategic positions. And here comes a so-called positional play, which is something that puzzles a lot of people. They cannot really understand what a positional play is, or rather they think that it's something very complex and there are so many different rules that you need to somehow put together in a in your planning. While in reality the thing is very simple. Positional play is about putting your pieces on nice positions. That's pretty much it, that's why it's called positional. It's about picking the right positions for your pieces. For your pawns as well, but mainly for the pieces just because they are much stronger and therefore they have much more influence on a position. So when it's a strategic thing, when it's a strategic type of position, you just start thinking about putting your pieces on the best positions possible, on the most active positions possible. And the right way to go about this is to start thinking about your least active piece. Because usually you have a few pieces which are active already, such as in this case you can see that the white's queen and the bishops are already fairly active, they're doing something, while the rest of the white's army, particularly the knight and the rooks, are not doing anything. They're not attacking, or at least looking at the black's position in any way, which gives you a very simple idea of what you should do. Now you should improve, one of these dozen pieces, either the knight or one of the rooks. And you just gotta ask yourself what is a better position for one of these pieces, which gives you a simple solution. You either gotta play your rook to d1, one of them, or you gotta improve the knight. And the knight is really not doing anything, and even more so, it's fairly difficult to realize how to use that. So when it comes to a knight, you just need to find a strong square, because unlike bishop, which can stand in your position and still put pressure on the long diagonal, put pressure on opponent's position, the knight has to be located exactly on the area where you're gonna start your operation, start an attack. So you actually got to deliver this knight closer to an opponent's army. And if you ask yourself how can you do this in this particular position, you can find the maneuver knight goes to a3, and from there it can go to c4 and then be placed either on d6 or maybe on b6. And both of these squares are going to be extremely great for white. This is exactly what white player Rubinstein did, and he won the game afterwards. So once again, I just wanted to show you how to think in strategic positions and what a positional play is. Something that is considered so complex, in fact, is super simple. It's about putting your pieces on better positions. And the exact way to think about this is to find your least active piece and improve its position. Now here's one more interesting example. This time Fischer is playing white versus Zuckerman, and it's white to play. At first it may seem like a tactical position because the white's queen is kind of attacking something in the black's position. And usually people start considering here like giving checks, which is the first thing that comes to their mind, and trying to somehow attack black. And even though it's true to some extent, you definitely may take a look at this check and see if there is any benefit there. But the problem for white is that the queen is the only active piece that white currently has, and you cannot checkmate an opponent's king with a single queen. Therefore, this thing just does not work, which makes you think that maybe it's more of a positional, more of a strategic type of position where you need to implement the principle of the least active piece. And if you ask yourself, alright, so what are the pieces that I need to improve, you can see that the queen is already active, that's the only active piece, while the rook and the king don't do much. And as for the rook, it's fairly difficult to relocate it to a better position because of all these pawn chains that block the whole board. So there's not much you can do here, but you can improve the position of your king. And that is why Fischer found the very straightforward way to do so. He played king to g4, and the king aims to go all the way forward to f7 and helps the white queen to attack the bishop on f8. And that is exactly what happened, and after that the king actually captured that g7 pawn, and white won the game very soon. But it's just the principle of the least active piece. And by the way, Fischer used it all the time brilliantly, and that is why his games were always so much logical and clear, because he just followed these and a couple other principles. Here comes the final example of today's video. I don't want to overload it too much with information. Just want to show you the essence, the most important thing, so that you know exactly how you can implement this in your games. Alright, and here I'm going to share with you one more thing, because sometimes you just can't find really what to do, and there is one more principle that can help you. Anyway, first of all, let's think about the white position. If it's white to play, how would you play here as white? If you think about the tactical aspect of the position, there are not many checks, captures, attacking moves that you can play right now. Rook f7 would be like some capture that you may think about for a second, but it doesn't do much. As for the attacking moves, maybe queen f2, even though black can protect f7's pawn really easily. And if you think strategically, then you need to improve the position of your least active piece, which would be your bishop c1, which is the only piece which hasn't played any move in this game, and which is currently totally and absolutely passive. It has only one square to go to, this b2 square. So if you think about how to improve the position of your bishop, you can come to the idea of putting your pawn to a4, which sacrifices a pawn, but it gives you the super great location for the bishop, where it cuts off the king. It's ready to be placed on d6 from where it'll attack the rook. And yeah, the black's position becomes really, really dangerous. Actually, now the king is really weak, and probably will win the game really soon. So that is how you can implement the principle of the least active piece here. But there's also one more idea that I wanted to illustrate by this example. Let's say you are playing black here. Sometimes when you start thinking about the principle of the least active piece, you're not exactly sure what you can do, because if you think here like, yeah, the black pieces aren't too active, but it's also not very clear how you can improve things. Because like the knight doesn't do too much on g6, but it's unclear what else you can do with the knight. The rook on b8 is only defending the pawn, but again, it's unclear how can you relocate it to a better square. So sometimes you are in doubts and you're not exactly sure how to improve your position. What is the least active piece even? In that case, you can think in the opposite direction. You can either improve position of your pieces, or you can restrict activity of your opponent's pieces. That is an equal alternative. That is why positional play is about putting your pieces on better positions or preventing your opponent from doing the same. Again, these two are equally powerful ideas. That is why if you aren't sure what to do with your pieces, you can at least ask yourself, how can I limit my opponent? And therefore, if you think about your opponent and you know that he's about to execute that idea a4 and bishop to a3, you may play a prophylactic move, for example, bishop to a4, which would block that pawn, and therefore white can't execute that idea anymore, and at the same time the bishop is putting pressure on the white c2 pawn, so the white's queen would be unable to move away that easily. So this may seem like a prophylactic thinking or something like that, but in reality it's much simpler, right? You're either improving your activity, position of your pieces, or you prevent your opponent from doing the same. So that's pretty much it when it comes to positional play. In a nutshell, that is pretty much it. That is how grandmasters think. In tactical positions, they think about checks, captures, attacking moves. In strategic positions, they think about positional play, how to improve positions of your pieces, especially your least active piece, or how to prevent your opponent from doing the same. I hope it was helpful for you and you have a clearer idea of how to think while playing chess, and hopefully you'll win many more games while implementing these methods into your practice.